for long. Soon, therefore, we became students at the madrasa.
He and his younger brother Ahmad were left by their father at the care of a friend of his before his death, who was himself a faqir, a Sufi. The one thing one reads about is in his early years, he was very much devoted to formal studies. The younger brother was always interested in Sufism. And there was an aspect of bookishness about him, you might say, in his early years, which also, of course, made him a very great scholar later on.
We had become students for the sake of something else other than God. But he was unwilling that it should be for the sake of anything but himself.
We know that he was a prodigy. All the evidence indicates that he memorized the standard text at a very early age and exhausted the intellectual opportunities of his own town in his early teens, and then had to head off to the neighboring provincial capital of Nishapur, where he sat at the feet of Al-Juwayni, who was, in the eyes of many, the leading jurist and also theologian of the day.
From an early age, I constantly thirsted after a grasp of things as they really are. For me, this was something instinctive, a part of my God-given nature, a matter of temperament, and not of my choice or contriving.
He is a voracious reader. He is somebody who wants to understand everything. He has an insatiable appetite for knowledge. He actually says about kalam, which is theology, he says that I did not write anything concerning theology until I had memorized 12,000 pages of the great theologians of Islam.
سلام احمد جان. سلام محمد جان. چطوری برادر؟ شکر.
He really is taking in this knowledge with a worldview, with a cosmology, based obviously on the Islamic concept of Tawheed, or the ultimate unity of God, and how that unity is manifest through diversity in the world. He talks about desiring to get to the root of problems. So he had literally mastered, memorized, interiorized, and then began to teach these things at a very early age.
در خصوص درس اسعد خراسانی بچه‌ها سوالات بسیاری دارن. نظرت چیست؟
The chains of traditional authority and inherited belief ceased to hold me.
شما بگو، شما نظرت رو بگو.
For I could see that Christian children always grew up to be Christians, Jewish children to be Jews, and Muslim children to be Muslims. I also heard the saying related from the Prophet: every child is born with a sound nature. It is only his parents who make of him a Jew, a Christian, or a Zoroastrian.
Ghazali had observed that while certain external factors shaped the different forms that revelation and religious experience could take, at the heart of all of these is the divine existence, and it is in man's nature to seek this reality.
When Ghazali speaks about sound nature, that referring to the hadith of the Prophet, you know, this word fitra. Can you explain to me what that? that actually means.
Fitra means actually the nature, but as it is the primordial nature of man, is the fitra, man as was created by God. And if you ask what this consists in, one can say in love of God and worship of God. Man is created for that. Now, the highest worship or the highest form of worship is knowledge of God. And if serving God for humankind means knowing God, then it refers to the intellect God has given man so that he can know him. This knowledge naturally is the identification of the known and the knower. One can put it like that. Man is made for this union. And that is why I said his primordial nature. By nature, man is a worshipper. Just as created by God.
There is an inherent nature of God that God has given human beings. And that nature has been imprinted in us. And one of the things about this nature, and I think Imam al-Ghazali's life is a reflection of that, is that there is a gnawing pain in the soul. And it does not go away. And one of the tragic aspects of human existence is that when we remove God from our search, and whatever we call God, if the Buddhists talk about ultimate reality, ultimate concern, this is still approximating our understanding of God. God is ultimate concern. If we remove ultimate concern from our lives, we have to find substitutes. This is human nature. We will find substitutes to fill that hollow space within man, because man is essentially a hollow being.
So how can we reconcile faith with reason? It's become a luxury to practice religion unquestioningly in the modern world. On the one hand, there is cynicism and no absolutes. On the other hand, rage is mistaken for revelation, and religion in its various persuasions hijacked by radical ideologies, allowing atrocities to be committed in its name. Why is it, how is it, that religion meant to be a means to salvation has become so unappealing? How has the profane become so seductive, so that we no longer are aware of the unseen, or are able to accept that there may be a higher purpose to life? This is a tragic condition. The ancients, even in their pursuit of the mundane, always knew that tradition and the pursuit of the sacred were always so much more important. In his search for knowledge, Ghazali traveled to study under the leading theologians of the day. But some of his most important lessons came from quite unexpected sources.
چیه ها؟ چیزی نیست. چیزی نیست. چیزی نیست. خواهش میکنم اینا رو به من برگردونید. این چیزی نیست.
این کاغذهای بی ارزش چندان ارزشی ندارن ها؟
این تمام اندوخته من از سفر گرگانمه. تمام اون چیزایی که تو این چند سال از استادم یاد گرفتم، این همه چیز منه.
از کافیه همه اینا رو ازت بگیرم تا دانشت پوچ بشه. کافی اینه که همشو ازت بگیرن اون وقتی که دانشت پوچ بشه.
In my heart, I knew he had a point. I decided he had been sent by God to teach me. Having experienced a run-in with a band of cutthroat robbers, I resolved to guard myself and the knowledge I had gained against any future encounters. I spent 3 years committing all the notes I had accumulated to memory, whilst continuing with my studies under the guidance of the learned and venerable Imam al-Haramain al-Juwayni.
The world has always been fraught with dangers, and as Ghazali said, you only really possess what you can't lose in a shipwreck. So do we spend our entire lives watching from the shore, or despite the dangers venture out in search of a deeper knowledge, one that isn't to be found in books alone?
Imam al-Ghazali recognized that there were basically 4 types of knowledge. The first type of knowledge was sensory knowledge, knowledge of the sensoria, that we had this ability to perceive whether it was hot or cold. We could look and see that it was day as opposed to nighttime. But he examined this and recognized that it wasn't true, that a man, a feverish man, would think it was hot when in fact it was cold. We can't deny the knowledge of the senses, but he recognized that the knowledge was not infallible, that the knowledge was something that we could be deluded into thinking, in fact, something, and it was not.
Sight is our most powerful sense. But when we look at a sundial, our sight tells us that the shadow on it is standing still. There seems to be no movement. But if we return to the shadow an hour later, then our own eyes will tell us that the shadow has moved. Not by fits and starts, but gradually and steadily, by infinitely small distances, never pausing or resting.
The second type of knowledge that he identified was rational knowledge, the mathematical knowledge. And so what he did was he began to examine all of his rational knowledge, and he realized, and this is questioning a priori assumptions, which is very interesting, it is very modern. What he realized is that just as he had discovered that the sensoria were not infallible sources of knowledge, that the intellect could also be in a deluded state, that we could actually think something to be true and have reasoned it out, but in fact it wasn't. And he felt very comfortable with mathematics, which is interesting because the modern world, one of the few areas where the modern world feels comfortable is mathematics. So he felt comfortable with mathematics because he said, whether we're awake or asleep, 2 + 2 will always equal 4.
اغرب زخم اغرب سیاه جراحه حرفم اول قسم به خدا دوم به صدق صفای محمدی اینو تبدیل به مار کنم. این چیه؟ چوبه. ها میبینین که همه چوبه. حالا اینه تبدیل به مارش میکنم، مار بسیار بزرگ خطرناک. هر کسی شکی به دلش را بده نفس‌ها رو تو سینه‌هاشون قبض می‌کنه. متوجهی؟ حواستون جمع باشه. اچی مکچی لا ترچی کاتی کوتی ملکوتی سمنی سمن برغری سمن گرگر.
Certain knowledge must be infallible. This infallibility of a proposition means that no attempt to demonstrate its falsity can create doubt or denial.